I'm trying to do this without getting too riled up and angry, but it is really hard. Hello Tandem fandom, my name is Alexis and welcome to the Tandem Collective, where you can find the latest book recommendations, tips, and news from Team Tandem. Next week is Banned Books Week in the United States. Now you may be thinking, why is there a week to celebrate and promote banned books? And the reason for that is increasingly school districts in America have been banning certain books in their school libraries. And these books are primarily about gender, sexuality, racism, anti-Semitism, and similar topics. What Banned Book Week does is it brings awareness and educates people about these book bans and the censorship that is enforced. In the 2021 to 2022 school year, there were over 1,400 book bans across the United States. Here you can see the books that got the most bans. If you're familiar with any of these books, you might notice that most of them have to do with topics like gender, sexuality, and racism. The reason that Banned Books Week is so important to talk about is because these are books that have been removed from school libraries, thereby preventing young people from being able to access these stories, both fictional and non-fictional, and thereby educate themselves and often connect with these stories. Schools are supposed to be a place of learning, and school libraries really do epitomize that. So think about how detrimental it can be for students not to have access to these stories and history and things that they might identify with that they might not be exposed to otherwise. So today I'm going to go through 5 in 5 banned books to shout about, and I'd encourage you to talk about these books and promote them on your social channels and talking about what they're all about and why they can be so important for students and young people. Stick with me to the end to find out more about the most banned book this year in the United States. The first book is This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson, and it's been described by Patrick Ness, who is a Tandem read-along author, as the book every LGBT person would have killed for as a teenager, told in the voice of a wise best friend. This Book is Gay is currently banned in 21 different school districts across the country, and within a school district it can include multiple levels of education. So 21 school districts could actually mean upwards of 80 to 100 schools that this book is banned in. You may know Juno Dawson as the author of Her Majesty's Royal Coven and The Shadow Cabinet, but this is a nonfiction book about all the questions you might have growing up about gender and sexuality, and it's told from the point of view of Juno, who is a trans woman. Think about how valuable this could be for a young person who is questioning their sexuality or their gender and having access to that in their school library when it's something that perhaps their community doesn't talk very much about or talks about in a negative way. The next banned book I'm going to mention is by Toni Morrison, whose books have a history of being banned in the United States for their depictions of racism and sexuality. This past school year, her most challenged and banned book was The Bluest Eye, banned in 32 school districts across the United States. The Bluest Eye has a range of mature topics, from racism to rape and incest, infant mortality, and more. And when the challenges against this book began and the bids to ban this book began by advocacy groups, their complaints revolved around the sexual content of this book. However, have you heard about books by white authors getting book bans in schools in the United States? I didn't think so. And that is because The Bluest Eye and similar books have very strong depictions of racism. Of course, if young people aren't exposed to the history of racism and the current state of racism in the United States, they're not going to have the opportunity to make progress and change those things, which is exactly what these organizations are hoping for by banning books like The Bluest Eye. The third banned book I'm going to talk about is Flamer by Mike Curato. It is a graphic novel, and Mike has both written and illustrated this book. Flamer received 25 book bans throughout the 2021 to 2022 school year in America. Of course, as a graphic novel, it's even more accessible to young people, especially young people with learning disabilities, limited attention spans, and it's even more descriptive in a lot of ways than a traditional novel because you have the illustrations. The fourth banned book I'm going to talk about is also a graphic novel. It is called Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and it was actually the first graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize. Mouse depicts the story of Art Spiegelman's father, who is a Holocaust survivor, and as such has been the target of bans and censorship ever since it was first published in 1981. The reason I've included Mouse on this 5 and 5 is because in addition to racism, anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial have been on the rise in the United States and worldwide. And bans of books about the topic of the Holocaust and Jewish life continues to perpetuate Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism because young people are not exposed to these topics. Graphic novels represent a huge portion of recent book bans. Another example is the graphic novel adaptation of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which was illustrated by Renee Nault. That one's particularly creepy and ironic given that it's about repression and censorship. And finally, we come to the most banned book in the United States in the last school year, which has been banned in 56 school districts. That basically equates to hundreds of schools that have banned this book. And it is Genderqueer by Maya Kokabe. Genderqueer is an autobiography by Maya and has classic coming-of-age themes about adolescent crushes, but through the lens of someone who is grappling with being asexual and non-binary. Evidently, this heartfelt memoir about coming-of-age experiences and discovering yourself in your adolescence is the most threatening book to certain advocacy groups and politicians. This book, like the other books on this list that have to do with gender and sexuality, is not only an incredible story and resource for young people who are going through their own self-discovery with their sexuality and their gender, but also for those who know somebody who identifies as LGBTQ+ and wants to understand them better. Have you heard of or even read any of these books? Are you surprised about what's been on this list and maybe some things that are not on this list? Either way, please shout about banned books during Banned Book Week and get the word out there to young people that even if these books are not available in their school libraries, these books do exist. These experiences and authors and people do exist. Look, it's true that these book bans are still increasing in the United States around topics that are very valuable to young people. However, weeks like this highlight the fact that these books are still out there, they're still being published, so stay positive, like my shirt says, and keep shouting about banned books. I'm going to bookend it there for today, but I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful, and if you have, please give it a like and subscribe for more book recommendations and tips from the Tandem Collective. You can sign up for Tandem's newsletter at the bottom of the video description to hear about the latest opportunities we have for bookish creators, and you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.